Now, when it comes to health insurance, it's a bit of a rigged game, and that's the primary reason I'm running. So I'm running as an independent so that I can hold everybody accountable, right, all sides, and go into DC and fight for you, right? Put all the partisanship aside, because we have things to do. It's very simple. That's the website, right? WeHaveThingsToDo.com. What we can do right now here in California is pass SB 562. It's a single payer program where here in California, yes, SB 562, yes. Here in California, we have almost 40 million people, and it's a nice melting pot of young, healthy, old, sick, right? We can make that work from an insurance program perspective, I promise. I used to work for a Fortune 100 insurance company doing variable annuities, right? You all are retired, so you actually know what a variable annuity is. My friends just think I work with numbers. I'm Chandler from Friends, right? Now I work for a different investment firm, but with the same goal of helping you get some dependable income, not from the stock market, with different investment strategies. One of those investment strategies is a REIT, a real estate investment trust, where we buy two things in the REIT: data centers, the internet, right, and surgery centers, healthcare. So I know these markets, I know this demographic, and I know the fact that how many people in here are living on a fixed income, right? So when we talk about COLA, that matters, because average inflation is 3%. So if the things that you're buying get more expensive year over year over year, but your income doesn't, what happens? Your buying power gets lower and lower and lower, right? And jumping back to health insurance real quick, I got bad news. Y'all are not profitable for a health insurance company. You spend 80% of your health coverage money, 80% of the dollars you spend in your life on healthcare come in the last 6 months of your life. It's a little bit morbid, but it's true, right? You're not profitable to the health insurance company because they know that you're about to become, or already are, very, very expensive. I'm sorry. But that is why we have to get the Medicare recipients, the VA recipients, the Medicaid recipients, all in the same pool with young, healthy people. That's what happens when you do a single payer program. So if we launch that here in California and it works, and I'm pretty sure it will, we can do that nationwide. So what I'd like to do in DC is immediately drop the Medicare enrollment age to 55. We gotta do that right away. The minute that we help people with their health insurance costs, they have more disposable income, right? Even my family, a young healthy family with a PPO, blah, 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 month over month, we spend a ton of money on health insurance. We gotta get that burden off the employer, get that burden off of you. We can run the whole thing for 3%, right? When we do health insurance, it's a passive business line. It's not a true good or a service, right? You let the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies continue to operate in a capitalistic private sector market, but the government provides the insurance. It's very simple, and we can do it. The rest of the world does, right? So don't let them tell you you can't. Don't let them tell you it's too expensive. You can regulate and you can negotiate in the world. That's just the two options that we have from governance, right? You can regulate or you can negotiate. I like small government. I like a social safety net, like Medicare and Social Security, but I like limited government. So I don't always want to regulate first. I want to negotiate first. But like I mentioned before, if you pull together Medicare, Medicaid, and the VA, you already have 143 million people. If California's on a single payer system and you throw those 40 million in, you're at around 200 million people in a country of 330 million. If I get to go to Big Pharma with 200 million people in my insurance pool, do I get to negotiate for better prices? You're darn skippy, right? Then they don't have to buy a patent and shelve it because we're already keeping their first drug prices down by negotiating lower, right? Shelving a patent is not a new thing. The car companies did it for years and years. They bought all the lithium battery technology and all the electric car technology and shelved it because they were busy selling fossil fuel engines, right? So that's not new. Negotiate or regulate. I'd like to keep the rest for questions at the end, so I'm going to pass it over to Rachel. But again, I'm running as an independent so I can hold both sides accountable. I don't need to do the big partisan thing. I want to be able to go in and kick the tires on both sides and hold everybody accountable. So, Kevin Kansinger, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Payne. It's so great to be here with all of you.
Just a little bit about me. I grew up also with a single mother who worked multiple jobs to put a roof over her head and food on the table. And I remember the journey for my mom after her divorce and what it was like to raise 3 children on her own. I really understood at that time that the best way for Americans to advance is to get a great education. And we know that that's being undermined today. I became the first person in my family to graduate from college and later went on to Stanford Business School. I've been a hard worker my whole life, and that very much comes from the roots in my family. My father's a union member, my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, and so I understand that work ethic. But in America today, working hard doesn't guarantee a livable wage. Working hard doesn't mean that you can retire with security. No matter how hard you work, we're seeing families fall further and further behind. So when I look around this room, it reminds me of the struggle that so many people in America are dealing with when surprises hit them. For example, with the windfall exemption and the way in which people are taxed without their knowledge or planning, the way in which this administration and the 115th Congress are trying to rip these so-called entitlement programs out from beneath us when you've paid in. It's very difficult to do proper retirement planning if you've got a bunch of surprises. And we can't do this to American families. I moved back to Orange County 10 years ago when my grandparents were going through a number of health issues. At one point, it was so expensive to try and find them the right kind of care, I had them move in with me. And I had professional care coming to my home and helping me take care of them, which was very expensive and very difficult work. I literally took care of them every day by myself with the help of some professionals and my sister, but it was a huge burden to have them without the proper care, without the proper security, and to have to try and help with compassion to finance all the different things that they needed on my own. I have great honor in helping them see them through that journey, through the end of their life. And it was a very important experience for me because we were very close. But no one should have that degree of uncertainty. No one should have to struggle that much, that late in life, especially when you've paid in your whole life. When I look at what's been going on with this Congress, even the word entitlement is wrong. It's not an entitlement. It's a social safety program that you've paid for and that we must guarantee. Right now, in the year 2034, we're looking at our benefits reducing to 79%. And we don't have a plan for sustainability. I think excellent points have been made about ways to do that. We also need to look at how we can increase that cap on payroll taxes so that we can cover a larger share of that deficit. It could cover up to 30%, which is significant. But we also need to think about other ways to ensure that every American has the opportunity to retire with dignity and security. I want to tell you a little bit about my background professionally. After college, I went on to work in the tech sector. I became an early executive at Google and set up what was a large philanthropic organization called Google.org. I was the first hire on the founding team, hired by Cheryl, Larry, Sergey, and Eric. And I got to set up this large $1 billion fund focused on global health issues. And it was in that capacity I got to see what other people around the world were doing to address critical health problems. Everything from maternal mortality and people who are living with disabilities in different countries. But I also learned that there's a lot of countries in the world that offer universal health care. And somehow they've managed to finance it. And somehow they've also managed to bring down their costs. They've managed to scale it. And part of these approaches require an understanding of how to eliminate waste, how to improve innovation, and how to mandate that the costs come down. For example, in Japan, the cost of an MRI was so exorbitant, the government required the cost to come down. And guess what happened? It led to the biggest breakthrough in innovation in MRI machines that further brought down the costs around the world of the equipment itself. Innovation can play a role here. And because of that, people in Japan pay less for an MRI than anywhere else. So there are actually ways that you can introduce technology, innovation, and smart economic sense to help bring down the cost and the waste. Do you know that 30% of every dollar that goes to healthcare is for insurance, billing, administration, and a lot of waste? Why? Why is it so complicated? Why do we make it so costly? When we know just last week, America was rated one of the lowest in the developed world in terms of health outcomes. So we pay the most and we get the least. That to me is completely wrong. We can do better. We are America. We deserve better, and we've paid for it. So from my approach, I would like to have more compassion in our healthcare system, but I also want to see sustainable economic models underneath them, and that's what's missing right now. I can speak from a personal experience about healthcare because I, like many people, had a health crisis. I was helping lead global expansion for Google's operations, and I contracted a near-fatal illness. I had to be medevaced out of Africa. It took about 2 years to recover. Very serious illness. And I'll tell you this, if I could not pay for my treatments, I would be dead. If I couldn't pay for the brain scans, if I couldn't pay for the medical coverage, for all the doctor visits, how could I have ever recovered? Not just from a health perspective, but from a financial perspective. People today are so close to poverty. They're one health crisis away. And medical bankruptcy is one of the largest causes of poverty and bankruptcy in this country. Why? We can do better. And so from my perspective, not only because of the personal experience that I've lived, taking care of my parents, my grandparents, and of course trying to myself recover from a health crisis, I have a deep understanding of the toll that it takes on the average person to not have that kind of security, to not have healthcare coverage. When we look at what's on the table, I support S41, AB Klobuchar's bill, to make sure that we negotiate lower drug prices. And I think many people on this panel have fantastic ideas about how to bring down the costs even further. I also want to bring innovation into the system. I want to demand better. I don't just want to pay for the cost, I want to pay for the outcomes. I want to ensure we have broader coverage for preventative care, alternative medicine, and to make sure that nobody waits until the emergency room to get access to healthcare because they couldn't afford to see a doctor. Finally, when we look at the broader picture, we know that this country isn't doing enough to invest in every person, starting at the very beginning with neonatal programs to ensure healthy delivery. The most dangerous thing a woman of color in this country can do is give birth because the maternal mortality rates are so high. That's inexcusable. Early childhood development programs are really important, but we know that here in California, there's a conversation around taking away the lunch benefit for low-income kids. I was one of those kids. I depended on that stipend. And I know that going to college was very expensive because I graduated with $200,000 in debt from undergrad and grad school that I had to pay for because I paid for my own education. And the only reason I could finance it was because of the combination of scholarships, and I worked hard for every one of them, student loans, and loans at low interest rates, which again, this Congress is taking away, and Pell Grants, which have disappeared. Right now, as a student, you are not allowed to refinance your student loan any longer. Imagine that. You can refinance your home, but you can't do that for your own student loan debt, which goes everywhere with you for the rest of your life. We have got to make it more affordable and fair so that every American family can get ahead and that every student that aspires to live up to their full potential has the opportunity to do so. I would love to bring to Congress a perspective that not only takes into account the real lives of real working families, but an understanding of what it takes to succeed and the heart to make sure that everyone is taken care of in a sustainable and scalable way with programs that make sense and that do not tear families apart and do not pull the rug out from under people. I think it's time to hold the government more accountable, and it's time to use our voice and our vote to do better. I'm Rachel Payne, and I welcome your support in this conversation. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing great today. My name is Omar Siddiqui, and I'm running for Congress here in California's 48th District against Dana Rushabacker. Well, I'll start my introduction by giving a background of who I am and where my family came from and why I am even here before you. I am the son of an immigrant father. My father was born in British India in the 1930s, and my father was blessed for being an engineer at a very young age, in his teens. And a British officer who my grandfather worked for advised him that there's no future in that war-torn India, now becoming India-Pakistan, and that my grandfather should send my father to the future. And my grandfather, of course, asked this British officer, well, where is the future? What is that? And this British officer says, well, send him to America. That's the future. But my father's family didn't have the means to send Dad to America. So this British officer helped my father apply to graduate schools here in the country. And the first school that responded of all the schools was the University of Minnesota. I met a fellow University of Minnesota grad over there. And what Dad did is he made his way to America on board of all ships, thanks to this British officer, the Queen Mary, the very same Queen Mary that's in Long Beach. But what my father remembers the most is that when he saw the Statue of Liberty, and he saw how welcoming it was. And you have to remember, he was a teenager at this time, and he comes to port, and he comes into the country. This was before TSA, before passports, before any of that. He comes into the country on an admissions letter for graduate engineering school. My dad had to make his way from the port to the bus stop to make his way to Minnesota. So my dad gets in the cab, and the native New Yorker cab driver asks him, son, where's all your stuff? And my dad's like, this is all I have. This cab driver says, well, you're gonna freeze in this New York winter, let alone Minnesota. So this cab driver drives my dad to a used clothing store and picks out jackets and mittens and hats and scarves. My father was very embarrassed. He couldn't pay him for that. But the cab driver said something that sticks with my father and has stuck with me. The cab driver said, it's on me. Just make a promise to yourself that you're going to do something for your country, that you're going to pay it forward. That was a big impact on my father, because you can imagine, he's by himself, away from his parents. He makes his way to Minnesota. He graduates with a master's degree shortly thereafter. And then fate changes to bring him to California. Governor Brown, yes, the father to the current Governor Brown, recruits Dad to work on the water projects as a civil engineer. And so Dad came to California in the early 60s to work on water projects. That's where I come in. I was born in the 70s here in Orange County. I'm native. I went to Orange County Public Schools in the footsteps of my father and a hero of mine, Benjamin Franklin. I love the idea of being engineer, scientist, inventor, but at the same time, statesman, humanitarian, and in the arts. So what I did is, after graduating with my bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering from USC, I went to Loyola Law School, where I had the honor of studying under Professor Johnnie Cochran, the same Johnnie Cochran from the OJ trial. And that's where I fell in love with trial work. I fell in love with fighting and advocating. So after graduating law school, I joined a large law firm for 4 years and started my own law firm in 2004 in Costa Mesa. That's how I got to my background. However, you may be wondering, well, if you're an engineer and you're a lawyer, how did you end up in politics? In 2010, the FBI reached out to me to garner my assistance in matters of national security and counterterrorism. The short version of that long story is, in essence, I was the attorney that uncovered and derailed President George W. Bush's Operation Flex spy program, a program that was sending undercover spies into places of religious worship in Orange County in Southern California shortly after 9/11. As the attorney that derailed President Bush's spy program, I had a reputation with the FBI as being the attorney that uncovered this expensive agent, but I also had a reputation as being the attorney that fought for civil rights and constitutional rights. So President Obama reached out and essentially wanted us to help with building and bridging a gap for national security. So I started working with the FBI since 2010, and I've been working in ensuring that our nation remains safe, but at the same time, making sure that we do so within the confines of the Constitution. Because there's one thing that I've stressed, and I've stressed this a lot, I've worked with Director Comey, is we cannot compromise who we are in essence of national security. Well, that started my road to politics. That started my road to making a difference. In 2015, November of 2015, I was venting to President Obama about how this candidate Trump is talking about building a wall and banning Muslims and creating division and scaring people, taking our country backwards, not forwards, how we've come. President Obama, he let me go on a good 8-9 minutes before he finally said, you know what, stop. You changed FBI policy from the outside. You changed the Operation Flex program from the outside, from President Bush. Why are you going to complain about it? Are you waiting for John F. Kennedy to come? Are you waiting for Martin Luther King to come? They're not going to come. It's us. It's you. We are the change we seek, as he says. At that point, I started to reflect. As a lawyer, I started to reflect. What am I using my talents and skills? What's going to be best for our country? In April, just 1 year ago, April of 2017, I had a meeting with FBI Director James Comey, who's been in the news a lot lately. And I was telling Director Comey, President Obama thinks that I should run for office and do something about it. What do you think? And essentially, Director Comey said, you know what? There's no time for you to stand around. You got to do something. But at the time still, my focus was on a project I was working on called the Diversity Agent Recruitment. And what my plan was there was I was trying to get more Arab, Jewish, Muslim, Korean, women, Americans into the FBI because the FBI was lacking diversity. But the problem I was having is that most of these applicants didn't want to join a Trump non-diverse FBI. Director Comey was livid. He knew, as I did, which was the whole purpose of my project, was I needed to bring diversity for purposes of national security, not just for a publicity photo. Director Comey committed. He said, you know what, I will come to LA, I will come to the event that you're hosting, I will tell those recruits firsthand why it's critical that we have diversity in the FBI and why it brings our country strength, and it's not a weakness. You can imagine the event that I was putting together mushroomed in size. Everyone wanted to hear the director himself. Of course, that day, I was very excited. I was on my way to the event, which was in Hollywood, and my phone starts ringing. I carry 2 phones, a law firm phone and an FBI phone, and my FBI phone started buzzing like crazy. And essentially, people were asking, is the event still going on? I'm like, well, why wouldn't it be? Well, because President Trump has just fired Director Comey. So if many of you wonder why Director Comey was in Los Angeles that day, it was for the Diversity Agent Recruitment event that I was putting together. That was my impact. That was the day that I will not forget in May of 2017 that I realized, like President Obama said, we are that change. Like Director Comey said, there's no time to stand around, that I made that decision to do it. When you look at who you want to represent you in Congress, yes, this is a job interview. And I'm taking this as a job interview. And all of you in your careers have had to submit a resume and talk about your education and your experience. And I guarantee you this, I want you objectively, regardless of which candidate that you're voting for, I want you to objectively look at one's resume, look at who they are, look at their background. I'm the only candidate that's an engineer, that's a lawyer, that has worked with the government. I've worked with presidents, I've worked with Secretary of State, I've worked with Director Comey, I've worked with CIA Director John Brennan, I've worked with levels of government. I am ready for this job on day one. I'm seeking your vote and your support. Please visit omarinthehouse.com, and I look forward to discussing the issues with you this morning. Thank you.
I don't think there's enough room for me to stand, so I'm going to stay seated here. That's okay, I'm fine.
No, it's working just fine.
Well, good morning. Thank you to CARM for putting this event on. John Bauman, thank you for the great warm-up that you did today. You know, as a kid, I remember the show, the Sha Na Na show, and you didn't really talk about it all, but I really enjoyed that show, the singing and the comedy that was in there, and I really appreciate you being here today. That's a great thing that you're volunteering to do, to bring awareness to the benefits that are at risk for seniors. So my name is Tony Zarkadis, Tony Z, running for Congress in the 48th District. I'm a Democrat, a former Marine captain, and I'm running to save the middle class. We all know that the primary is coming up fast, right? On what date? June 5th, okay? And that's just a few weeks away, so it's definitely getting to the end here of a long process. I want to go right into the subjects that you all came here to talk about: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I want to start by asking the audience, who created Social Security? Franklin Roosevelt, right? And more broadly, the Democrats. So John said that he's nonpartisan, but I am partisan. So the Democratic Party created Social Security, and how many people here are Democrats? Okay, everyone should have their hand up, because if you're relying on Social Security and Medicare to butter your bread, then I can't understand why you would not be a Democrat. And I run as a Franklin Roosevelt Democrat. That's who I look back on and say was one of the great Democrats, along with LBJ. What is the value of Social Security? How much would you need? Everybody talks about, oh, Social Security, it's barely enough to live on. You would need, and I bet Kensinger can back me up on this, $1 million to buy an annuity that would give you the same benefits as Social Security. A guaranteed payment monthly, adjusted for inflation, transferable to a spouse. Okay, that's an expensive benefit to try to buy from an annuity. And how many people here have saved $1 million in their working lives? Not too many, right? It's pretty hard to save $1 million for retirement on your own when the median income in this country is $60,000. That's household income. That's probably two people working. That's not just one person's income. So $1 million to buy an annuity that would equal what Social Security pays. So obviously, it's a pretty good deal, all right? And it was created for a reason after the Great Depression, because so many seniors were in poverty. I think somebody mentioned before, half of all seniors were living in poverty before Franklin Roosevelt implemented Social Security. Now how many seniors are in poverty, that age group? 9%. The lowest of all age groups are in poverty is seniors because of Social Security and Medicare. When we had the Great Recession in 2008, seniors did okay, right? They didn't lose their income. Their Social Security checks still showed up. They didn't lose their health care. They still had Medicare. So Social Security was that rock that was there for people when the economy collapsed. Too bad it's not there for young people, or at least a Medicare for All type program is there for young people when they lose their jobs in a recession or a depression like we just recently had. Everybody talks about how much we pay into Social Security. So who knows what the cap is on Social Security right now? Yes, sir.
127K.
127K, that's close. I checked it this morning, 128.4. Okay, and that leads to, and that's good enough on other people.
There was a prize.
How many people attended Wimbledon in 1972? 90,002. You missed it by 2. So that can lead to an $8,000 tax, okay? And I forgot to start my time. That's what I pay, because I'm maxed out on Social Security. So I pay $8,000 a year in Social Security tax. That's more than a lot of people pay in federal income tax every year. In the 70s, the cap was at $14,000. Okay, in the 1970s, the most you could pay in Social Security tax was $700. And today, it's $8,000. And that's a long-term trend in this country where employment taxes are now a much bigger part of people's tax bill than income taxes. And who does that hurt? Of course, it hurts the middle class, okay? And that was allowed to happen by both parties, and it was a big mistake. The trust fund that we're all concerned about is gonna be depleted in what year?
2038.
2034, but that was close. And that number changes.
Depends on who you listen to.
That number changes every year as they analyze it. And then after that, they'd be able to pay 80% of all benefits. Still a great deal. You think about right now, I'm paying $8,000 a year in taxes for Social Security, and my benefit is projected to be $3,300 a month. Okay, so that's $36,000 a year, guaranteed, and I'm paying $8,000 a year. And the people who were paying $700 a year back in the 70s now get a benefit of like $1,300 a month. So a great deal. Again, if you have $1 million, you can buy an annuity that will equal Social Security, but most people in America don't have $1 million when they retire. The Republicans oppose Social Security. They opposed it when Franklin Roosevelt and the Democrats created it, and they oppose it now. And they want to do what? They want to privatize it, right? Maybe not for you. They're like, oh, well, don't worry, if you're a senior and you vote, we're not going to change your benefits. But we're more than happy to screw over your children and your grandchildren. All right? That's what they're saying. Is your children and your grandchildren aren't going to get the good deal. You'll still get to keep it, but vote with us, and then we'll shore up the finances. I propose that we remove the cap. That $128,400 cap, gone, and increase Social Security benefits now and in the future 10% across the board. That's what we should be doing. That's what Bernie Sanders proposed, and that's what I agree should be done. Now let's talk about Medicare. Who created Medicare?
LBJ.
LBJ and the Democrats. Again, if you're a senior and you're not a Democrat, you need to reevaluate your financial situation. What's the tax rate for Social Security, for Medicare?
1.45%.
Excellent. 1.45 by the employee and the employer, a 2.9% total on all earned income. Only earned income is taxed for Medicare, not passive income. The hospital insurance program is solvent right now, as of this morning, to 2029. And then they're able to pay 88% of benefits. So 2029 is pretty good. It's improved since the ACA was passed. It's been it was close to 5 years it was going to be insolvent or be at that 88% level. But because of the ACA and some of the legislation that was in there, it's gotten better. Now remember, the ACA also gives preventative care to not all but most Americans. Right now we have the stupidest system in the world, right? People spend their whole working lives ignoring their health, never going to the doctor because they don't have insurance. They don't know they have high blood pressure. They don't know they have high cholesterol. They don't know they have high blood sugar. And then they turn 65 and they show up on Medicare and say, okay, save me now. I paid into the program. And they have all kinds of health problems, expensive health problems that have gotten critical. It's stupid. And we're the only ones doing it. And what we should be doing is have a system that everybody has insurance, they all go to the doctor, and they stay on top of this stuff. And they get their lisinopril, and they get their metformin, and their problems don't become critical, and they don't have to have a foot amputated. Really? It's gone that fast? All right, the last one is Medicaid. This is a joint federal-state program, right? And the state can pay up to half, depending on the state. The programs are administered by the states, and they're given a lot of leeway by the federal government how they're going to run them. 74 million people are receiving Medicaid right now. And what's the 2/3 of all Medicaid dollars are spent on what?
Diabetes?
Nope.
Drugs?
John?
Long-term care.
Long-term care. Exactly right. So, nursing homes. My grandmothers and my godmother all died in nursing homes, paid for by Medicaid. Okay, it would have been $5,000, $6,000 a year. If you think Medicaid is just for the poor, you better think again, when 2/3 of that money is going for long-term care for ordinary people like us. I look forward to your questions.
What's your website?
TonyZForCongress.org.
Okay,
So